we do have a quorum,
Yes, sir.
right?
And
Good.
I will call the roll.
Okay, so yes,
Mr. Howard, Representative Howard,
Present.
Mr. Barnwell,
Present.
Dr. Morris, Mr. Smith,
I'm here.
and advisory member, Mr. Green.
I'm here.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So this is the Finance Committee special call meeting Wednesday, November 20th. It is 10 a.m. We have a quorum. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Favor second?
Okay.
Uh,
Second by Howard.
Okay, great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. So item number 3, action items, the purchase of new cutaway vehicles for DART. Mr. Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been working on getting quotes off of the state contract for cutaway vehicles for the DART program, and we received the quote late Tuesday of last week. So we needed to go through the quote and make sure that we had what we needed. And after reviewing the quote and having everybody review the quote, so getting back to how all of this started, we met with Palmetto Bus Sales, who's on the state contract, went through the vehicle, what we're looking for, what we need in the vehicle, and then requested a quote. We received that quote late Tuesday after 4 p.m. So we didn't want to rush it and get that on there without having to go through the quote. So appreciate everybody on this call going through this. But the vehicles that we currently have in service, excuse me, are well beyond their useful life by the number of years as well as by the mileage. So in looking at the mileage, they are a majority, I would say 95% of them are over on mileage. They're 300,000 plus miles for a 150,000 mile vehicle for paratransit. So that was included with the request. The quote, as you can see, we're at 137,158.92, and that is a basic vehicle with the information, with the optional equipment that we requested. And our request is for approval of the procurement for these vehicles off of the state contract at 137,158.92.
All right. Did you say how many?
That will be 7 vehicles that we are purchasing. So we're just over 800,000.
Okay. And how are we disposing of the old vehicles? Is there a process that we use?
The older vehicles will be auctioned off. That's our process. We are the federal government, the FTA, does not have any vested interest in those vehicles. We'll have to double check to make sure that if we replaced a transmission or an engine, that we don't have federal interest in those. If we don't, they will be auctioned off and then disposed of that way, the same way that we did the trolleys.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay. Any other questions?
I did have a question.
Mr. Barnwell.
I see that there is an additional vendor on contract that does offer these vehicles. Did we price or quote anyone else beyond Palmetto Bus?
We looked at the prices on the state contract, and this was our most advantageous quote based off of the state contract.
I only say that because, for example, I'm looking at state contract and the base price for Palmetto Bus for this vehicle is 87. The base price from interstate transportation for a similar vehicle is 82.5, or 87, almost 88 per se, from Palmetto Bus. So that's the only reason I posed the question. If we'd entertained another quote from some other vendor on contract.
We looked at the other vendors, but we did not go off of the state contract. We looked at specifically at Palmetto Bus Sales based on prior experience with them on the purchases that we had in 2014 and 2016, and went off of that.
Okay.
Okay, additional questions?
I will say, Mr. Chairman, that the cost of the vehicle, the overall cost is a little bit higher on this, just because in the past we have not ordered the vehicles with the cameras installed, and we are going to do that. That way we can get the vehicles put into revenue service a lot faster. So that's on the quote as well.
Okay. I had a couple of quick questions. One, I just noticed that the state contract, it just says it's valid through 10/31/24. So I just want to make sure it's still valid. It does seem like it is, given that they dated their quote 11/12/24, but I wanted to confirm that that's not an issue. And then kind of, to the point of what was already stated about, other vendors, I see a big portion of the cost is those added options. Are they, so do we know, I think you just said that it's slightly higher with this vendor, but we're getting the benefit of perhaps a quicker turnaround time and maybe some other things that make it, on the whole, more advantageous to use this vendor. So I guess, can you speak to those two things? And then finally, my third question is this grant funded partially, or are there federal dollars that are used for this? And then how does this square with our already approved budget? So sorry about all those questions thrown at you at once, but
if I don't answer all of them, please remind me. The vehicles we get within I believe 60 to 120 days. So that's a very quick turnaround on the vehicles. The cost has, based on the configuration that was requested. So we had a meeting and went through the vehicles that were offered and what the additional cost would be. And we had a couple of vehicles over here and reviewed them, and then we all made that determination on how the seating arrangement needed to be. So that added some of the cost, and then having the cameras on there. So we're trying to do what we can to get the best vehicle and in the quickest time that we need. Just for example, today we have 7 out of 22 DART vehicles that are down, and that causes a lot of a wait time for picking up passengers. And again, it was the most advantageous that we looked at whenever we reviewed the quotes and buying off of the state contract. Uh, there, did I answer everything or?
The only other one, I think you
Grant
did,
funding?
the question about the contract, just make sure it's still valid.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the other was federal funding but in the current budget. How does this square with the current budget?
We do have that in our federal funding program. And Michelle, if I miss something, please add that. So that's in our federal grant funding. We have the local match for that as well.
Is it 80/20 or 85/15?
85/15,
Okay,
as long as it's, ADA accessible, we can get them for 85/15.
and we've got enough banked grant dollars up to that. I mean, I calculated it at, what did I have? 137 times 7, 960 total. So we would be responsible for 15% of that.
Correct.
Okay. And the other question was the current budget, at least within reason, anticipates this year.
Yes, and, Mr. Smith, also, a couple of those, or maybe even 2 or 3 of those vehicles will be paid for out of the, 5307. Hold on, let me make sure of this. Yes, which is 100% for the new grant that we had. So it's not entirely 85/15. Some of it'll be at 100%.
Okay, excellent. Even better. So then, final question. Sorry, I thought I had my final one. This is my final one. I heard we're buying 7 now, but we have 22 in the fleet. So we're going to replace about a third. Do we have a plan for the replacement of the? Because what I heard you say was all of them essentially are really over their useful life. What's the plan for the remaining 2/3?
So we have the ability to procure more vehicles. When we do that, we buy a majority. So in the past, if you buy more, there's a potential that if there's one issue that happens, then it's with that whole fleet that you buy. And that's one of the things in 2016 we had. All of the majority of the vehicles were procured in 2016. So now we have all of those vehicles that have aged out. So what we're looking at is a program of this year we'll replace 7. Next year, when we look at our grant funding for next year, then this is what we have in place for grant funding. So that might be another 5 to 7 that we can replace next year. So we're getting into where it's a program rather than a full
plan.
buy. Yes, that helps us with planning and ensuring that the vehicles all don't go out, either by age or by mileage. And we're having a lot of issues with our current fleet, and we just really need to update this fleet. And it's something, it just needs the attention.
Okay. Now that sounds good. I just worry that we're not even going to be able to make it to the next batch. But if we're truly as far along as what you, I mean, 300,000 miles for an expected, 150 or whatever I heard you say, that's, we're really pushing it, but sounds good. I think that answers my question. And any other question from sorry, Mr. Pearl.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The maintenance has been doing a phenomenal job of keeping the vehicles up to date and mechanically sound. Typically, and we are running into some of the issues, at least with one vehicle, where you have this age on those vehicles that the floor starts to degrade. And we're at that point with a vehicle or two. So then it's looking at replacing the subfloor on some of these vehicles. So it's just a matter of time. They're not heavy duty like our fixed route vehicles. They do take some wear and tear, and they just don't last as long.
Right. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Pearl, Ms. Ransom, Roz?
Hey, Andy, I just had a question for Director Pearl, if I can.
Sure.
So two questions. I think you said that 7 out of 22 are down. How many people, so how much of a wait list is this creating? Because those are all down.
Well, they're doing a great job of keeping up with that. So I haven't looked into that just yet, but they're managing, making sure that they're picking up the passengers on time so far this morning. But we'll need to look back into that and making sure that that's still the status quo.
Yeah, because the concern I have is that these are our most fragile passengers, and if they miss a doctor's appointment, it could literally take another month or two before they get another doctor's appointment scheduled with them. And then my second question, and I'll leave it there. But my second question is that do these also have the straps for people who are in wheelchair to tie them down? I know that sometimes our other buses did not have that.
Yes, these do have the straps to tie the passengers down, seat belts as well. Yes.
Okay.
And just because this is the list that we have this morning on the down vehicles, it doesn't mean that all 7 are still down. So I need to get an update on that. But that was current as of last night and early this morning. So I've not got an update yet on the vehicles.
I understand. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to recognize Dr. Morris, who just joined.
Okay, great. Welcome, Dr. Morris.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning. So we are just wrapping up, I think, our discussion about purchasing 7 new cutaway vehicles for DART. The information was in your packet. These are purchased off of state contract, $137,000 each for a total of about $960,000, if my calculations are correct. And most of these will be at a 15% local match, so 85% grant funded. A few of them will actually be closer to 100% grant funded. So most of it is federally funded, but we've been discussing kind of the current state of the fleet and how Mr. Pearl and his staff are trying to implement a kind of a rolling replacement of those. We have 22 total, so we're trying to replace a third of them now. So do you have any, Dr. Morris, do you have any questions for staff on?
Yeah, I have a couple, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm late. I had a doctor's appointment. Yeah, I noticed that we are purchasing the buses from Palmetto Bus Sales in West Columbia. Does this require us to look into more than one company before we purchase?
So we've talked a little bit about procurement, Dr. Morris. Generally on state contract, we're able to just engage whoever's on state contract because the procurement's already been done for us. But I will defer to Mr. Pearl for more context there. We've talked about it a little bit, Dr. Morris, but I'd like for him, to make sure you're given the same information that we've been given.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and that's a great question, Dr. Morris, that it is off of the state contract, and that procurement has already been completed by the state. So we go off of the state contract for the most advantageous procurement, whether that is price or whether we can get that vehicle sooner and the options that we need.
Okay, and my next question is, how much is this actually going to cost the Comet for the purchase of these buses?
So that varies based on, and Ms. Ransom had mentioned, we have a couple of different grants, 5307, which would be 15%. And then we have, Michelle, correct me if I'm incorrect, but we have a couple of vehicles that will be bought at 100%.
That's correct.
Okay. Bought at 100% by whom? The Comet?
No, the feds. Federal money.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All procurements we're utilizing federal funding for the procurements.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. So my rough calculation, I just did 137,000 times 7, got 960, and I realize that's probably not incorporating all the fees and taxes and all that. 960,000, we would be responsible for no more than 144,000. That's 15% of 960. So the very kind of high, big picture numbers, but that's kind of my rough calculation. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Barnwell, did you have a question?
I have two other questions. In the essence of looking long term, I know we have more buses to purchase. How much more grant funding do we have available to go towards the purchase of the additional buses that are to be replaced, say in the next year, or in kind of I know that we spoke earlier about the plan of kind of the potential of replacing the rest. Is that this fiscal year? Is that in the next fiscal year? To be able to do it, or over the next 3 years that we're doing complete replacement of all of them. And again, how much grant funding do we have available to be able to put towards the purchase of the remainder? And in the essence of talking about that, I see that this potential contract doesn't expire till 10/31/2025. And two, in the essence of really looking at the big picture, I would like us to entertain basically getting a quote from a second vendor on contract. If there's a chance that we can actually save some money and be able to stretch those dollars over the replacement of all 22, I think it would be to our advantage to be able to entertain at least getting a second quote to see if there's a chance to be able to save, even if it's $10,000 a vehicle or $5,000 a vehicle, being that we are kind of in high demand for these particular vehicles in replacement. I think it would kind of help us all.
Thank you, Mr. Barnwell. So I guess just to clarify your second point there, Mr. Barnwell, I think staff was asking for us to make a recommendation for this first 7. Are you suggesting that we take a step back from those 7, or are you saying looking forward to the next 2 or more batches that we
I go back to potentially how much we could save right now with the base price being for those 2 vehicles, probably a $5,000 or roughly a $5,000 difference. For these first 7, if it's necessary to meet the service needs, I'd say yes, let's push forward with these 7. But for any going forward beyond these first 7, I'd like us to make sure we can entertain a second quote just to make sure that we're doing optimal spending and optimal savings for all of the rest of the replacements that are pending.
I certainly, Mr. Chair, I certainly agree with Mr. Barnwell. I've always thought that we would take a look at least 3 vendors before making a decision to purchase anything.
And generally, that's true. I will speak for the city when we do that procurement. those are our rules as well. But when we can buy something off state contract, we do so because the state's already done that analysis. Especially when we've got something that's exigent. It's something we need a quick turnaround on. So, I think to the larger point here, maybe what we as we look to future purchases of buses, even off of state contract, if we can see kind of the totality, how does the all-in cost compare between the vendors, and then what sort of non-purely financial considerations are we looking at? I think I've heard today turnaround time, but also configuration of the buses. There are certain like intangible things that go into these discussions. Make of the vehicle, if our technicians have a particular aptitude or experience with a particular make, that sort of thing, I think would help the finance committee in the going forward. But and then, Mr. Barnwell, your first question, can you state it again? We kind of went, I took us down the path of the second question. What was your first question?
I was just kind of referring to, of course, being able to get a second quote. I think the contract for this particular vehicle doesn't expire till 10 to 31 of 2025, but the long-term plan of replacing the rest.
Right, that was your first question.
Yeah, that kind of coinciding with trying to save as much money on all purchases to kind of stretch those particular dollars.
So the timing of of any kind of future, we talked a little bit about the kind of trying to phase this for the purpose of not having to buy everything at once in the future. What is that time? Are we looking at 7 per year over the next 3 years? Is that kind of the thought, or something different?
The general thought, we can procure 5 to 7 per year, and when we look at the contracts, we look.
Director Pearl, we can barely hear you. You sound muffled.
That's probably because I have the paperwork over the computer.
The microphone.
That's better.
Yes.
That's better.
That's better. Thank you.
That's why. Thank you, Pam. When we look at the contracts, we look at the price, but we also take into consideration the turnaround time that we can get these vehicles. So there's a couple of things that we do and why we do it in order to procure the vehicles. And again, this was the most advantageous that we reviewed and going through procurement, and we can get these the quickest. So that's why we're going this route. But we do have the ability to procure more next year, and we will make sure that we have more of a spreadsheet with this that will have the details on what the price is per vehicle, as well as the turnaround time and any other thing that would set that specific contract apart, and why we're going with that particular company off of state contract.
And you were muffled when you said this, but I think you were saying 5 to 7 per year for the next couple of years.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think I see Ms. Ransom's hand.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that our board has always been really, really good about allowing us to use a portion of our 5307 allocation to set aside to buy vehicles. Even knowing we're not going to buy a vehicle maybe that year, we have been steadily setting aside some funds so that it doesn't come as a full fleet replacement. As long as we continue along those same lines, I don't see any issues at all with the replacement of both paratransit, and we're getting ready to do some of the fixed route vehicles as well.
Right. And I think in the spirit of a question that Mr. Barnwell raised a few minutes ago, these paratransit purchases and the regular bus purchases are really two separate buckets. Is that true? I mean, am I thinking of that correctly? We're not pulling too much down for one type of bus to the exclusion of another type when we do this, are we?
Well, no, when we submit an application, we have to specify the size of the vehicle. We can always request a grant revision and change the size, but typically we put in for 35-foot as far as the fixed route vehicles and cutaways for the paratransit. So there's a little bit of both.
Just both. Okay. I think that,
And
all
if
right.
necessary, we could do the grant revision and put a little bit more somewhere else.
I think in short, there's enough grant funding to cover our anticipated fleet replacement needs of all types for
Correct.
the foreseeable future. That's kind of
As long as we keep going the way we are, yes.
okay. All right. So any other
Well, Mr.
questions?
Chair.
Yep, Dr. Morris.
Mrs. Chair, and I need to also emphasize what Mr. Bonwell indicated. We may not have to wait until October the 31st this year, but in the future, we need to make sure that we look at as many vendors as possible before we have a proposal come to the Finance Committee.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Morris.
I did have just a few others. How long did it take for us to get the quote from this particular vendor?
Approximately,
Mr.
muffled
Purr, you're
again.
muffled. You're muffled. We can't hear you at all. Try
A few
again.
days.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. I didn't have anything over my computer this time. The question again, please.
How long did it take for the vendor to supply the quote for us for these vehicles?
It was approximately a week and a half.
Okay. And he mentioned about turnaround time. And right now he's the only one that supplied a quote that's told us his turnaround time.
Correct.
Okay. And the reason I ask all of this is because we tend to, in another space, I tend to work with the manufacturer, and I also tend to work with all the vendors on state contract, including others that could provide quotes. And so what I wanted to make sure of was we were kind of getting the best turnaround time on those vehicles as well, and along with the best pricing. So if we were to, and maybe to our chair, if this is the question to pose, pending we were to say push this forward today, when do we look to have a PO to the vendor to be able to initiate the purchase process?
So once it is approved today, then it'll go to the full board, and then after that we can begin the process of procuring the vehicles. So it'll probably be around February or March before we take delivery. Estimated. That's the earliest.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or?
Mr. Chair, just one comment. I know Dr. Morris had to join us late, and I understand because I have doctor's appointments too. But these, and I do share that we should try to get the best price. But I think it was missed that Director Pearl stated that these already have the cameras installed, so we will not have to pay for the cameras to be installed. And I think did you say on the other buses we might have to have the cameras installed, which would be an additional cost to us? Is that correct?
It's an additional. So in the past, the cameras have not been, when we've ordered vehicles in the past, the cameras have not been installed, and then we, as the Comet, have to go to the vendor, procure that, and that we get the vehicles in, and then we procure the cameras. That delays the vehicles getting out sooner in revenue service. So what we've done with this procurement, we have added the cameras to the procurement. So when the vehicles come in, we don't have to add that much. We put on the vinyl, the DART signature on there, and then one internal camera that would take approximately a half an hour to do, and then it's in revenue service much quicker. So as we're going through the process, what we want to do going forward is to have as much installed during production prior to us getting them arriving here. So we get the vehicles out in revenue service faster.
Right, and that might explain the difference of the cost between the base model of the one that I think the other gentleman is looking at and this one, correct?
The base contract price is what they quoted to the state. So that is outside of anything that we added additionally, which is on the additional equipment included in the proposal. But we will have in the future a spreadsheet breaking that out off of the state contract and what each is, and then the timeline that we can receive those and the cost. So the board, so everybody can see that it is the most advantageous quote that we receive.
Okay, thank you.
So again, I think this is sort of an exigent circumstance because of the state of our fleet, but in the future, when we consider big fleet purchases, it would be good to have that kind of spreadsheet, I think, showing not only those, the base cost, but then all the additional costs for each vendor, but then also kind of the intangible things that you're considering as staff when you select a vendor. Because we do this at the city as well. We don't always pick the lowest cost because there are certain things that make a particular package better. So there are other, considerations aside from cost that you're looking at.
Yes,
as long as our procurement policy allows us to look at other things outside of cost, purely cost, then it's something helpful information, I think, for the committee and ultimately the board to look at. Ms. Ransom, I think I see your hand again.
Yes, I also wanted to let everyone know, and I wish Margaret was here to tell you that she's at some training. The feds have indicated to the transit agencies that they would encourage us to buy off of our state contracts and get just basic base vehicles. Meaning this is mostly for the bigger buses, the seating arrangements, where the lift is located, things like that, just because it is taking so much time to get specialized vehicles, made to order vehicles. So you will likely see us bringing forth a recommendation from state contract if it's available, rather than doing a formal procurement, because the procurement itself takes a very long time. It can take almost a year to write up the specs for every type of vehicle you could think of that you might want in the future, instead of just going to state contract and getting what you need at the moment. So I just wanted to caution everyone that that's the way the federal folks are leaning.
Thank you for that. I hate to keep using anecdotes from my day job, but we do the same things happening with police cars right now, that where we used to do a lot more of a robust in-house procurement, everything's taken so much longer, especially, just, ordering the cars, but also the additional things that you have to put on them, that we have found ourselves relying much more on the state contract than we have in the past for the same reason. So.
Yeah, and totally ditto with us, Andy, as well,
Mm-hmm.
in West Columbia.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other questions or motion? If none, I'll make the motion that we recommend to the full board the purchase of 7 DART vehicles as outlined in the procurement information in the packet. I don't hear a second. So there is no second to that. The motion would die. Do we want to clarify for staff, what would be acceptable if we don't want to second that motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, so I think, given there's some hesitation, I want to make sure we get an accurate count of the vote. So we've got a motion and a second to recommend this to the full board. Those in favor, if we can do a
Roll call.
roll call.
Okay.
Yep.
Representative Howard,
Aye.
Mr. Burnwell,
Aye.
Dr. Morris,
Abstain.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right. So I think that was it. Let me just one more second. Let me go back to the agenda here. There was no agendized item for discussion, but is there anything that any of the members of the committee would like to bring to the committee for during this special meeting? Okay. Well, hearing and seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Okay, got a motion, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Sounds like everybody's okay to adjourn. So thank you all for the the time today for the special meeting. Thank you to staff for, putting this all together for us, and look forward to seeing everybody at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you all.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.